All right. Looks like we're live here. Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome back to Out of the Weeds Live. My name is Nish Sampath. I'm the founder of Switch Advisory. Today we're talking about AI in your small and mid-sized business because the business owners we're talking to these days are concerned about keeping up with the trends and they're reading about AI. But outside of that, almost none of them know what to do with it come Monday morning. There's a flood of information. The speed of change is crazy and it's causing this kind of perfect storm that's leading to this analysis paralysis. You've got hundreds of vendors pitching you, and it's frankly overwhelming. And so you sit on these decisions thinking that you'll pick it up in the next quarter, but then a year goes by and you're still stuck at go. So today, we're trying to get past the hype and talk practical use. Where do you actually start? What are some of the simple workflows that you can look at? How do you get your team on board? I've got my friend Steve Kenway with me today. He's a fractional CTO and the CEO of Rolling Wave Consulting. Steve has built and sold his own software company. He advises boards on tech strategy. And then, frankly, he's the guy owners call when a project is off the rails. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us a bit about the company.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nish. So Rolling Wave Consulting is about 15 years old, and it was born out of the kind of identification that to get tech projects done, leading with project management increases the likelihood of delivery success. And so, although we tap ourselves into technical advisory and technical roles, we ground everything in project management. So whether we're working inside of a Fortune 500 company or with a startup, we always go back to those principles. Um, uh, when we look at it from a service perspective, we have purely just project managers that are available to help lead some of those initiatives and individuals, but we can also be your full team. And a little bit of what I'm hoping we talk about today is, what does that full team kind of look like in this new advent of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really fits in, frankly, with our fractional models, right? Fractional COOs plus fractional CTOs on your side of the fence, along with people to help execute that. I think that full delivery model makes a ton of sense in today's kind of evolving world and evolving technology landscape. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the analysis paralysis, right? You and I have been chatting about this for a while. What are some of the major things that you're seeing that's causing these owners to get stuck right at the starting line?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, we're 3 years into this journey of generative AI and agentic AI and the power of LLMs. So everyone, maybe not everyone, I think it's the status 50% of the population is using the tools now. And that's, I think, believe the fastest to 50% in history in terms of kind of new tooling, new technology. So everyone they see it, they help it write an email, they ask it a question, it responds in a very human-like way. But then it's taking that and turning it into productive use, and then getting that to kind of proliferate throughout your organization. And the difficulty that we have as businesses is in the early stage of your startup, you're kind of in that exploratory. But when you're a business, you're in the exploitation stage. You know what your product is. You've got your people. It's about how do we tune things as tightly as possible so that we get the most out of it. We get the highest quality. We get the best returns. It's most predictable. And so now when you bring in something like AI, where a lot of owners of companies can see the power of it, they hit that analysis paralysis, getting into that, let's roll it out. And I think there's a couple of things that are a bit different than previous technological advances. So if we look at the SaaS period before,
Yep.
it was very, very opinionated. It was like you come on, you sign up for Salesforce. Yeah, you got to go through an implementation, a lot of flexibility. But at the end of the day, here's how you use Salesforce.
Right.
And you got to stay within its guardrails, and they've got a really good playbook on how you can kind of get up and running and maximize that. So I think that's the biggest, kind of analysis paralysis step right now, is that it's such a blue ocean. There's so many possibilities. Where do you start?
Yeah, that's great, right? Like, I didn't really think about it that way where you have a product back in the day, SaaS product, and it is the user experience is very specifically outlined for you already. Here's exactly what the workflow is. Here's how to do it. Here's how we're going to implement it for you. Yes, there's some minor variability in it, but it is what it is, right? Problem, solution. Now we have solution, all sorts of problems. Which one do we even tackle?
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me, when we were colleagues at a large healthcare provider, and we kind of came in at the tail end of this. We saw the backside of it, but it's the advent of the Access database, where all of a sudden, you could create a database for all of your data management needs. And so when we came into the organization, there was hundreds of Access databases throughout the organization, and everyone had spun those up. They were identifying a need and a problem, and they were matching it and creating those databases. The problem that created on the back end was now you had this unmanaged process. You had unmanaged data everywhere. It wasn't secure. In the case of Access databases, it wasn't centralized. There was like no backups, et cetera, because it was all just local copies. So I feel like we're in a similar type of period where we've got the power of a database now in every user's hands. And we need to kind of figure out, okay, well, how are we going to roll this out so we don't end up with hundreds of Access databases again?
Well, that's exactly it, right? Like, it's not like from an organizational perspective, no one's using it. They're just not using it collectively and consistently. It's kind of everyone's, personal research assistant and, today writing assistant. And everybody's doing whatever they want with it, putting whatever corporate, information in it. And risks are high. And that's probably what's leading to a lot of this like fear, from owners being like, hold on, what are we doing with this thing? It's great that you're experimenting independently with it, but the potential risk is also significant. We've never even thought about that.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of organizations that are making decisions on rolling it out based on that as their guideline. So not maximizing the power of the capabilities, like staying on the leading edge with OpenAI and Anthropic.
Yeah.
They're rolling it out with Copilot because they're already a Microsoft shop. They feel really confident in the security mechanisms they put in place. Copilot can, go into that trusted environment and connect with that data. But the flip side is like right now, maybe not in the future, it's moving very quickly. Copilot is probably the least powerful to be that transformative agent inside of your organization. It's good for writing an email, answering a question, maybe help you stitch together some data. But it's nothing compared to that true agentic nature that you would get with using, Claude Code or Claude Cowork or OpenAI Codex and ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. When I think about a lot of high risk businesses, they are specifically leveraging, the Microsoft platform just because of their fear from a security perspective, even though the tools aren't necessarily kind of the bleeding edge and right where they should be. I was speaking to some lawyers yesterday, and that's exactly where they're going. There's just too much at risk for them at this given moment, given what they know.
Yeah, and it's something you have to understand your risk threshold. Um, uh, and I think if you come up with a strategy that takes that into consideration, but you're acutely aware of how you want to get to that next level. How and the next level is really truly getting into that agentic state where you're not just prompting this thing and it's giving you responses back, research, writing, etc. But it's like actually going out and doing work for you,
Yeah, let's
which
talk
is
about
really
that.
where we all want to be.
That's exactly it, right? Today, we're still, for the most part, still stuck in the research writing mode, right? Um, what does an actual agentic workflow look like inside of a business? Give us some of these use cases that you've seen play out.
Yeah, so an agentic workflow is essentially, this recursive, autonomous, set of responses and queries that are happening inside of the LLM. And what has enabled that? The LLM remains the same. So the brain is the same. The model is the same. It's the harnessing around it that's allowed to stitch together and create reasoning. So you can give it this task and it can go away and work through the steps, 3, 4, 500, steps in that process to truly get some work done. So where are we seeing some really cool value? There's kind of two heuristics that I use today. Number one is there a task that you're doing that's very repetitive, and you haven't necessarily had the kind of technical expertise to automate it? One of the things that LMs are really good at, especially coding agents, is writing code. And so now, like never before, an everyday person who doesn't write code can prompt Claude Code to go in and write code and take this repetitive task that I do all the time and turn it into automation. So that's the first one. The second one is I use it as it's the thing I never have time to do, but I want to do because it would make my business better, but I just never get around to doing it. We're busy,
Which
things
is
come up, fires, so you
totally,
just don't get to it.
which is most owners in most of their time, which is like, you're dealing with the daily grind. You can't figure out how to, like, again, work on the business and get out of the weeds. And so you get insular and focused down, and you don't get the time to work on the cool things.
Exactly. And so one of the big ones that I've seen that's a real quick win that's extreme value is being able to use a coding agent to build out your reporting. And so the old process was you go in, you download all these spreadsheets, you export all the data from the different places. You've got a spreadsheet that you've built, and then you go in and you plug in the values, or you go and copy and paste from each the original source. And then ultimately it gives you that view of your business, that dashboard view. You work in a big Fortune 500 company, you've paid people to put all this data into an EDW, and you've got Power BI plugged in, and they've already designed all the dashboards. So they've got all that. But if you're a small, medium business, normally you're doing that yourself at the end of every month with Excel. And I know in my case, and I try to stay as disciplined as possible, that's one of the first things that gets cut. I'll do it next month. And
Yeah.
so you fly blind for a month. And we've started using, in this particular case, Codex to go and assemble all that reporting. And so one of the really cool parts about it is that because coding agents, co-working tools are really good at writing code, whether it's single use or something that you use kind of consistently going forward, it can connect to APIs really easily.
Right.
And so now you're not just going and downloading, the exported report that's available in that tool today. You can hit the APIs and you can get the raw data. So in one instance, one project I'm working on, we get all of the subscription, all the transaction data, all the the payment data, suck it all out. And then we assemble that with usage data, combine it into those two sources, and then it produces a monthly report that has way more depth and breadth than what we were able to do before manually. And then I also tell the LLM, I say, go and interpret that data for me. Tell me what you think. What am I missing? What blind spots do I have? Are there any trends that you see that I don't see? And so you kind of have this little, financial analyst sitting at your, the end of your desk doing this work for you and giving you kind of opinions. And sometimes the insights are really interesting, things that you didn't think about. So that process of stitching together that reporting, I think, is a really, really easy place to start. And I hear a lot of businesses kind of talking about, how can I get this in place?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one, right? Internal and external. A lot of our professional service clients, that's one of the use cases we work on first. It's aggregating all that information is incredibly time consuming. It's taking people away from their current jobs. Really the conversation is about what are we doing with the data and how are we using it effectively? So, I was chatting with some folks in wealth management, some of our clients in wealth management the other day. We're also chatting with some of our clients just in marketing agencies, and they have to report to their clients on a routine basis, and it's a huge amount of time consuming work. So just being able to pull that data together on their behalf, provide that overview so that they can then provide the human interpretation afterwards, that, to add that personal touch to really knowing their client. I think that's a massive value add.
Exactly. And you could do that, like if you had multiple stakeholders, you could have a separate report for each of them based on
Right.
what's most important to them, all on the same foundational information. The other cool thing so one of the downsides of LLMs is that they're non-deterministic. So you run the same prompt 5 times, you're probably going to get 5 slightly different answers, just the way that the
Right.
math works. But you can start to take some of the prompts, etc., and turn them into skills and run books accompanied with code. So it becomes more deterministic. So in that scenario that you're mentioning, if you've got to run these reports each week and they all care about, or each month, and they all care about slightly different things, you can create a run book that it's not you having to go in and go through that same agentic prompting process to get the agent set up. You can
Yeah.
just say, hey, run this skill, run this run book, and produce this report for that particular stakeholder. And boom, it's done.
I like that a lot. And I think, a friend of ours posted this morning on LinkedIn, and he was talking about how, AI has created so much efficiency, but somehow none of us have got our time back from it. We found ways to fill that time with, more tasks and more AI work. But this feels like one of those use cases that is actually effective at, removing some of the human intervention required, cutting many, many hours of unnecessary overhead time from analysts to go and drag all that data back in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is it all depends, like I go back to your harnessing. Like if you feel like you're not gaining time from this, one is you're probably doing things like you just wanted to do but couldn't do before. But you also got to get your environment set up. So 2 elements there. One is you got to truly be on an agentic harness.
What does
I'm
that
not
mean?
saying that so it means that you've got to be running a framework underneath that allows you to truly interact with your agent like they're a first class citizen,
Okay.
like they're an employee. And so personally, I have OpenClaw running on a Mac Mini, secure sandbox, so that the agent employee doesn't go rogue. But I'm able to send it text messages and tell it to do work. So if I get a research idea, I can assign it to that. It can work and churn and do this work overnight while I'm sleeping, and I can come back and see the report in the morning. And so I think a lot of it right now is a lot of folks who aren't finding some of those advantages. They're sitting at the terminal at their computer, and
Right.
they're the ones actively prompting face to face with their their agents or their LLMs. The second piece is starting to pull those agents into your team. So there's a new platform that came out about a week and a half ago called Buzz from Jack Dorsey at Block. There's another one, one of my university cohort colleagues works at Shopify now. He was also part of the one startup that exited. And he was telling me that within Shopify, they've built their own platform. Shopify bakes all their own tools.
Right.
And so they've built another one. And so the whole concept behind this is that your agents are first class citizens. So it's very similar to Slack where we can all chat with each other. But right there in the conversation is an agent, and they are as a person. And so what this allows us to do is it allows us to bring our agents into the teams. So imagine you had a group chat where you've got 2 humans and 2 agents, and maybe they do an operational daily check. They just
Okay.
run through customer care as an example and just see are there any important messages, anything that we need to, respond to. And you can assign that work to the agent to go do all the prep work.
That's
And
cool.
because the humans are also in that, my colleague, let's say you, I prompt Rick, my agent, to do the work. You can see the result. Nish can see the result of the thinking of the agent working through it. And let's say the other agent is Bill. And Bill's going to draft a whole bunch of responses based on Rick's work. So Rick can tell Bill to do the work afterwards. And so now you've got that agent to agent communication. Meanwhile, Nish and Steve are still in just like we're team members. And we can monitor their work, see the activities occurring, intervene if necessary.
Yeah.
But we get the benefit of it. Where a lot of it today is, like I said, terminal to terminal. People have their personal agent. The only time you ever get the output of that is if a human then turns around and gives it to the rest of the organization. So
Right.
how you set up your harnessing in your environment is going to be critical going forward so that you can really pull your agents in as first-class citizens.
So think about it as a team almost, right? In that analogy, I'm almost thinking like morning scrum comes around, you have your agents plus your other team members on scrum. Everybody's having a conversation. They're digesting some of that information and you're talking tasks and priorities back and forth. Is that a world we're
Exactly.
looking towards?
That's the world we're looking towards, and it's going to go a level above that. So, I know that we've got a lot of American counterparts, but in Canada, we have something called scientific research and experimental development, or design, maybe SHRED,
Yeah.
and you have to keep extremely detailed records to get those tax credits from the Canadian government. You could have in your daily scrum, you could have a SHRED agent as people are talking things, it's going back inside of Jira and validating, is all the time tracking there, all the notes there, is everything connected to the code, so that at the end of the year, when you get to your shred submission, you're doing your tax return, you've got all the underlying evidence to support receiving that tax return with no additional effort, no project work. Maybe you still bring in the consultants to help you kind of characterize it and protect your interests, but all of the pre-work that normally is so time consuming is all done for you in the moment in those scrums by your shred agent.
Right. And so it's taking it, a leap beyond what we used to do, which is like, grant writing or proposal writing. Cool, you can leverage your historical, proposals, but now you can almost say, okay, let's go measure the efficiency of the last project that took this amount of time. How many human hours? What kind of, financials did we have? What was the impact on the business? Pull all those data sources together collectively, and then have these tools write out the information. But someone's monitoring in the back end, saying, as the work's happening in the last project, are you producing the right data so that we can use it for the next go around?
100%. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then it even goes a layer on top of that. So once you've got that good hygiene within your teams,
Right.
again, it's always tough to get your teams to do that naturally, but if you can have someone behind the scenes reviewing, monitoring, maybe even doing some of it for them, you're in a really good spot. But then when you go to write the actual proposal, the other big thing that I do is I hardly type anymore. Everything is voice. I think I maxed out in grade 4 at 40 words per minute in typing, but I can definitely talk a lot faster, and I can provide a lot more context. And when I'm crafting a proposal, for example, I can really inject the nuances of what I want to say in that proposal, whether it's responding to something like an RFP that's formal, or it's something that, we've just had a customer come to us and
Right.
ask for a proposal or a solution. And so using voice really helps me to get that context in my voice, etc. But the agent can then go and fact check against all that underlying foundation information and then write it in my voice so you don't get AI slop.
Right.
Because that's what I think we've all seen it now. Like you can see AI slop from a mile away.
Totally.
And there's techniques where you can use a lot of this tooling to get the advantages, get it to do the work without producing AI slop.
Let's talk about the hygiene thing, because I think that's very interesting. Is it the human that needs to support the hygiene, or is it the AI that's supporting the human's hygiene? Like, what's that relationship?
Yeah, so I think at the big, at the onset, of all of this is you got to have good business processes. You got to have good workflows.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
if we the humans design the process in such a way that it's mapped out, everyone understands what their role is in the process, and getting a little bit of my soapbox, people don't make mistakes. There's just bad process. So making sure that we've got a good process in place. The same
Right.
applies to agents. If you've got a good process in place, your agents are less likely to make mistakes and produce slop. And so on the hygiene side of things, I'll give you one example because we were working on it the other day. We're working on a piece of code right now where every time we change the API, we want to make sure that the documentation, which is automated, is updated at the same time. And so historically, what you would have done is a blocker. Like, we're going to block this particular change until the developer has gone in and done that thing and then move things forward.
Right.
That can create a whole bunch of other problems. But what we can do now through an agent or a skill is we can actually tell the agent, hey, as it's going through the workflow in the process, and when the agent does its code review, does its checks, check to make sure that the documentation's up to date. And so it can really support that hygiene side of things as long as we've designed the workflow or the process in such a way that the agent really understands, has the right input, understands the logic, and it has the right output to send a response to the humans or other agents to act upon it.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. Apply that to the bookkeeping use case you had told me about. How does hygiene fit into a scenario where you're having the tool do, reconciliation for you?
Yeah, so my dad is 76 year old. He was a CA before there were CPAs,
Yeah.
and helps with our books. And so one of the things that he self-discovered on his own was using Claude Cowork to do reconciliation. So we have to bring in all our transactions. He would do this all manually with a VLOOKUP in a spreadsheet. And now he just, at the end of every month, on top of all the other accounting and bookkeeping stuff, he goes and he runs, he attacks the problem with Claude Code, puts all the underlying materials into a folder the same way that he did it before, and then he gets Claude to do the actual reconciliation. And so what it's helped us is, so we always did the reconciliation. It would happen, I think, twice a year previously. We would 100% do it at the end of the year before we closed the books to make sure that there was no outstanding accounts, there was no dollars being left, our payment processor wasn't stealing any money. But now we can do it every single month. And so that is just the health and the confidence in our accounting and our bookkeeping is so much higher. And to be honest, it not a huge change in terms of implementation,
Right.
because it's the same workflow and same process that we followed all along. It's just that we can do it more frequently.
You can trust the numbers again.
And you can trust the numbers.
It's pretty amazing. Um, so, we've talked about some of the use cases. What does it actually take to stand something like this up? Realistically, who owns it? Is it a 12, 18-month initiative, hundreds of thousands of dollars? I think those are some of the fears that people have before they even cut into it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's in projects of yesteryear, in this SaaS world where the supply of writing code was rate limited. Um, we are in a new supply abundance in terms of writing code. Uh, one of the things that we used to talk about as software developers is you never wanted to have single use code. That was a waste. Why expel all this effort if you're only going to use it once?
Right.
Now with coding agents, single use code it's free and cheap, so you might as well use it.
Right.
And so what it's done is, because it's just a force multiplier in terms of being able to generate code and use LLMs, it's taken a 12-month project and it's shrunk it down significantly. Or it's a 12-month project where you've been able to dramatically increase the amount of scope and depth and complexity of what you're able to accomplish. And there is one caveat that I'm seeing, though.
Right.
Is you have to make sure that process is guided. because as much it's a force multiplier in a positive direction, it can be a force multiplier like the access database scenario
Right.
in the wrong direction. And so, one of the things that the model we're moving towards is having these forward deployed pods. So a lot of people are probably familiar with the forward deployed engineer term, where you take an engineer who understands this, put them on the front lines, and help them go and integrate the reporting for that staff manager, for example. This takes it a step further and pairs that developer with a PM.
Okay.
And the PM is responsible for liaising with the business, coming up with the backlog of things that need to be attacked. It's also that PM can do a little bit more BA work than in years past because they have the tools themselves to do a lot of this agentic work. And so they're truly managing the relationship, understanding those workflows, identifying the pain points, and then keeping the engineer focused in the right direction so they can go really quickly. And so those 12-month projects, or waterfall or agile, et cetera, where you've got multiple sprints, you can start to see value really quickly. You can see value in 30 days. So that's really the way that we're trying to kind of position it for organizations, that it's less about this big, piece of work, and it's about making sure that we stay true to the business and then tackling as many of those problems as quickly as we can.
So let's take a manufacturing organization for an example, right? Like, let's move off of the tech. Manufacturing company comes to you. We look at their value chain, understand the products they're delivering and what's going on. Where does the team start?
Yeah, let's say, since I've worked a little bit in the service and repair side of things,
Yeah.
what we would do is we would say, okay, let's focus on that particular problem. And I know that's traditionally been, especially depending on the size of the manufacturing, very difficult to support. If you're a multi-global organization, it gets complicated very quickly, especially if you've got to deploy service techs out to stuff that's been manufactured and then installed in a particular like large kilns, medical devices, et cetera.
Yeah.
So what I would start with there is I would say, okay, let's go in and understand the problems. So we would start with the discovery with the PM. The engineer would be there to hear all the detail, get all that context, start identifying those highest pain points. And I know that in the case of service and repair for kind of large, complex manufacturing scenarios, it's getting the underlying data back to the service organization to then be able to assess, okay, what do we need to do here? Like, do we need to ship them just a replacement? Do we need to fly a tech out? Or is this like hey, maybe try restarting it and we can kind of just give you some instructions to solve your own problem?
Unplug
And so,
and replug.
unplug and replug. So
Yeah.
where we could help with that is there's a lot of different places or different techniques to get that information. In some cases, it's the device has it. So can we build some integrations? Those things are often available in other places, other uses, but service and repair doesn't have access to it. So can we write some integration against that? The second piece is, traditionally in some of those other SaaS products, very rigid forms that they would have to fill out. Not always the most intuitive and friendly. Could we turn that into an intelligent chatbot that is prompting the individual to provide all that information, taking them through a more intelligent and human-like process of describing the problem and sharing those details? And then having an engine, once you get all that accumulated, to then do the triage. So maybe it's looking at a history of hundreds of cases previously and understanding the successful outcome. Most organizations have that now after running SaaS platforms, using that as a knowledge base to then inform the decision making of like, this is probably a warranty replacement scenario. This is probably send a tech out. This is probably just respond with this, and starting to sort a lot of these things so you can get responses out to your customers a lot faster, especially in high volume, multi-global, complex environments.
Makes sense. And even for manufacturers that we're working with, like smaller manufacturers that would have similar problems. And they would also have the issue of not just triaging the fix, but how does that match to the math, right? Is it more effective and efficient, cost effective to send a human versus just send a new, device? What does it do to our brand? Like, how do we collect that brand information and collate all of that together? What are the survey results from our clients saying about our service, et cetera? And I think the real power is how do you aggregate this information that we have all these disparate sources for, and then be able to tell a more interesting story and produce really cool results from it.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Like, the financial calculation side has always been done, but how does it affect brand? How does it, affect your NPS score? Like, that would be another layer. And the beauty of, forward deployed pods is they can go and do all the integration work to get all that data in the same place. And the power of the LLM is it can understand all information at once. So it's really easy and fast for it to say, okay, I've got to check all six of these sources, take all of these things into consideration, and then make a recommendation or triage this or direct it. And at the end of the day, you still want humans in the loop. You're not using this to remove humans. You're using this to get your humans to do higher value work, and in most cases, touch other humans. Create more human to human contact so they're not having to do all this paperwork behind the scenes. You can get them on the phone with that particular person who's upset and have a conversation to then review the notes and then make that decision on how you solve things.
I mean, that's a really good point, right? So when we're thinking about a lot of this, my head says a lot of this dies when there is fear, uncertainty, and doubt across the team. How do you get the team on board to actually use the tools instead of fearing, things like layoffs right away?
Yeah, I think first of all there is an organizational change management, and I don't think that the large foundational model companies have done themselves a great service in terms of they've done it to raise money and market like these things are unbelievably powerful. They're going to change the world. But that's also created a lot of the fear that it's just going to remove, people from their jobs, which I'm not seeing at all. I'm actually seeing the reverse. It's actually starting to create more business and then the companies are using it, generating more revenue, generating more opportunities. Therefore, there's actually a requirement for more people. But the best way is organizational change management. So as you roll these things out, explain, first of all, make awareness, desire, knowledge, activation, reinforcement. And so follow that communication plan as you roll out these projects. Hey, we're starting to take advantage of this. There's going to be forward deployed pods deployed inside of our organization to help us do that. Hey, here's how you use these new tools and these new things that we're building for you. Okay, we're all going to start using it. And then let's just keep going. So this is a continuous part of our mindset forever going forward. The second piece, and this is something that I learned from, when we went to, this is going to get technical, but when we moved away from big releases in software,
Right.
which were the bane of my personal existence, because when we used to do releases, and Nish, I think you probably remember the old days, you'd have to like stay up all night and do them in the middle of the night. And it was this long release process. Inevitably, you break a bunch of stuff. And then, you have to spend the next day trying to fix things and you haven't had a chance to sleep yet. So we moved to something called continuous deployment, where every single little incremental change in code goes out independently. And so the beauty of this is that you can then, if something breaks, you can instantly roll it back. Now, telling software teams that we're moving to continuous deployment was like, whoa, 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 whoa. We're going to be releasing code all day, every day. I'm
Yeah.
not comfortable with that.
Yeah. I'm never sleeping. You've
Yeah,
just created a nightmare for me.
I'm on all the time.
Yeah.
And so, what I did in that instance, I said, let's just do it once, because there's a bunch of stuff that we had to build. We had to change our mindset. We had to change our process. I said, let's just do it once and see what happens. And we did it once, and it went really well. And the team looked at each other and they said, I think we could do this again. And then within probably a couple of months, we were deploying 5 times a day. So I think the real trick is start small, have the right team, attack one problem, do it once, see the results, and then work from there.
So, who owns the initiative then? I mean, not we're not a big, massive company. We can't have an AI department or a full tech team that's involved with this. Is it the process owner? Is it what part of the organization owns these types of initiatives?
It still comes from the executive stakeholders. Projects live and die by executive sponsorship. So if it's meaningful to, the C-suite, and they explain to the organization that we're doing this, we're all going in the right direction, and we're all going to reap the benefits of it, even though it might be a little bumpy as we get there. It
Yeah.
starts there. Where you choose to deploy your kind of pods is the thing that will probably depend on each business in itself. And we used to talk about the concept of creating super users as a nucleus on projects previously. So you would roll something out to a big organization. You'd want to start with that super user group because they then become your advocates as things spread to the rest of the organization. So I would start with people that are change positive. They like this type of stuff. I would not start with detractors or people that are traditionally negatives or critics.
Okay.
Start with the teams or departments that are really, really positive and good with organizational change management.
That's awesome advice. Listen, we're running on time, Steve. What are some last pieces of wisdom you think you want to tell the folks out there around starting some of this, and what should they know before getting into it?
We are at a pivotal moment in technology. I can remember 2 or 3 instances of these types of moments in my career. And so there is a arbitrage opportunity for those businesses that take advantage of it, just simply by being in the game. So my recommendation is have a strategy, consult an expert, and get started. And if you're curious, you can always reach out to Nish or myself, and we can kind of help coach you through that early steps. But the sooner you get rolling, the quicker your company is going to become AI native.
Yeah, small experiment, probably the best way to go, right? Just if you think too large, then you just, again, back to the analysis paralysis, you just get stuck. So, how do you move quickly, learn, make some mistakes as you go? But frankly, you'll be ahead of most just by getting rolling.
Exactly. I like that little pun there. Rolling
Yeah.
wave.
It's been awesome, Steve. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate the insights. For anybody who wants to connect with Steve or learn more, check out the Rolling Wave website. We'll put it on the LinkedIn post, or reach out to Steve on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Nish. This was fun.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Steve. Take care.
See you.
Bye bye.